Hey everyone, tonight we're diving deep, way back into the sun-drenched streets of ancient Alexandria. Imagine, if you will, walking up to a sleek, modern vending machine. Maybe one of those incredible Japanese ones that dispense everything from hot ramen to tiny collectible anxieties in gachapon form. You pop in your coin, make your selection, and thunk clatter whir, out comes your desired item. Simple, right? Now picture doing something similar, but 2,000 years ago, not for a soda, but for a splash of holy water? Yeah, you heard that right. It's one of those historical details that makes you tilt your head and go, huh. Honestly, with the state of ancient plumbing and the general miasma of a bustling port city back then, you probably wouldn't have lasted a week without needing some kind of divine intervention, or at least a very strong constitution and a peg for your nose. Most of us modern folk are a bit spoiled, let's be honest. So before you get all cozy and your eyelids start feeling like lead weights, take a quick sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know, and it lets me know I'm on the right track with these sleepy explorations. And hey, while you're at it, feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is drifting off from around this big, sleepy world of ours. Now hit the lights, get your fan whirring for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The air around you begins to shift. The crisp, digitally filtered reality of your room softens, warms, and grows thick with unfamiliar scents. You're standing on a wide, stone-paved thoroughfare, the sun a fierce, almost white-hot disk in a sky of impossible blue, beats down on your shoulders, and you can feel the warmth radiating up from the flagstones through the thin soles of your sandals. This is Alexandria, the pearl of the Mediterranean in the heart of Hellenistic Egypt. Your first sensation is the sheer noise, not the jarring clang of modern traffic, but a vibrant, organic cacophony. There's the rhythmic creak and splash of oars from the nearby harbor, the distant, mournful cry of a seabird, the clatter of wooden cartwheels on stone, and voices, so many voices. You hear the lyrical cadence of Greek, spoken by merchants in flowing robes arguing prices for amphorae filled with wine or oil. Beneath it, there's the softer, more ancient murmur of Egyptian, from laborers guiding donkeys laden with goods, their skin glistening with sweat. Occasionally, a snatch of Aramaic or Latin drifts by, a testament to the city's status as a true crossroads of the ancient world. This city, founded by Alexander the Great himself, is a magnet, drawing people and ideas from every corner of the known world. Mainstream historical fact: Alexandria was a cosmopolitan hub, deliberately designed to be a center of Greek culture and trade in Egypt, rapidly becoming one of the most important cities of the Hellenistic world. You take a slow, deliberate breath. The air is a complex perfume. There's the sharp, briny tang of the nearby sea, of course, carried on a gentle breeze that offers only fleeting relief from the heat. Mingled with it is the sweet, cloying aroma of exotic spices spilling from a nearby market stall, cardamom, perhaps, or cinnamon, a scent that speaks of far-off lands and perilous journeys. Then there's the dust, fine and pervasive, kicked up by countless feet and hooves, coating everything with a pale film. And under it all, the faint, earthy smell of the Nile's fertile silt, the lifeblood of this ancient land, even here in this most Greek of Egyptian cities. You start to walk, your steps unhurried, falling into the rhythm of the crowd. The architecture is breathtaking. Grand colonnades of creamy white marble line the streets, offering shaded walkways. Elaborate carvings adorn the lintels of doorways, depicting gods and heroes, mythical beasts, and scenes of daily life. You pass by imposing public buildings, their scale designed to impress, to declare the wealth and power of this city. In the distance, you catch a glimpse of something truly colossal, a tower piercing the sky, its polished surfaces reflecting the sun. That would be the Pharos, the legendary lighthouse, one of the wonders of the ancient world, guiding ships into the bustling harbor. It feels less like a functional beacon and more like a statement, a defiant finger pointing towards the heavens. Your attention is drawn to a quieter, more contemplative district. Here the buildings are still grand, but there's an air of scholarly calm. This is the area of the Mausion, the great center of learning, home to the famed library of Alexandria. You can almost feel the intellectual energy thrumming in the air, a silent vibration of accumulated knowledge and relentless inquiry. Imagine scrolls upon scrolls, representing the wisdom of generations, carefully copied and preserved. Scholars from across the Hellenistic world would gather here, men of science, as mathematics, poetry, and philosophy, to study and debate. It was here that Euclid formulated his geometry. Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the earth with astonishing accuracy, and Callimachus cataloged the vast collection of texts. You probably wouldn't want to be quizzed by one of them after a long day. Their standards for light reading were likely a bit intense. As you meander, you notice the prevalence of temples. They are everywhere, ranging from small, unassuming shrines tucked into alleyways, dedicated to local deities or household gods, to magnificent, sprawling complexes honoring the major Olympian gods alongside revered Egyptian deities like Isis and Serapis. Religion isn't just a Sunday affair here. It's woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Offerings are made, prayers are whispered, and rituals are performed constantly, seeking favor, protection, or purification. And purification is key. The ancient world, for all its intellectual brilliance, could be a messy place. Ritual cleanliness was paramount before approaching the gods. Holy water, or lustral water, was essential for washing away spiritual or physical impurities. You see people, their faces etched with devotion, or perhaps just the mundane concerns of the day, cupping their hands to receive a splash from a priest at a temple entrance. It's a gesture repeated countless times a day in countless temples. Weird, tangential detail. Some ancient purification rituals involved not just water, but also the smoke of specific herbs, or even rubbing oneself with certain types of earth, believing these substances had cleansing properties. Imagine trying to get an airport security agent to understand your ritual clay rub-down. The priests, garbed in linen robes that look surprisingly cool in the oppressive heat, seem to be busy. Some are stern and officious, others more benign. You can imagine the slight inconsistencies. Perhaps one priest gives a generous dousing, while another, maybe a bit tired or distracted by the philosophical debate he was just having about the nature of the prime mover, gives a mere sprinkle. It's all very manual, very human. And humans, as we know, are prone to all sorts of little variations. Perhaps a worshiper in a hurry tries to get a bit more than their fair share, or a less affluent devotee feels they received a lesser blessing. It's the sort of minor, everyday inefficiency that might niggle at a particularly ordered mind. Now, imagine a man. Let's call him Hero. He's not a king or a famous general, but his mind works in extraordinary ways. He's an engineer, a mathematician, a tinkerer, someone who sees the world not just as it is, but as it could be, with a few well-placed levers, gears, or perhaps a clever application of water and air pressure. Hero of Alexandria is one of those figures from antiquity whose ingenuity feels startlingly modern. He's associated with the Mauseion, surrounded by all that intellectual ferment, but he's not just content with theories. He likes to build, to demonstrate, to make abstract principles tangible. You might picture him observing the temple rituals, not with the rapt devotion of a worshiper, but with the keen eye of an inventor. He sees the priests, the cues of people, the slight variations in the doling out of holy water, and perhaps a little spark ignites in his mind. What if there was a way to make it consistent, fair? What if the gods, or at least their temple administrators, could benefit from a bit of automation? It's a rather cheeky thought, isn't it? Automating the divine. You can almost hear a skeptical old priest muttering, "What's wrong with a good old-fashioned ladle, eh? Worked for my grandfather." Hero was known for his work with pneumatics, the mechanics of air and other gases, and hydraulics. He designed devices that seemed like magic to the uninitiated, temple doors that opened automatically when a fire was lit on the altar, the heat expanding air which pushed water, which activated a system of counterweights and pulleys, simple yet brilliant. Fountains that produced surprising jets and figures, even a primitive steam engine called an aeolipile, a spinning sphere propelled by jets of steam, more of a curiosity at the time than a practical power source. Historians still debate whether Hero's more complex inventions were intended as practical, everyday tools for the masses, or if they were primarily sophisticated demonstrations of scientific principles, perhaps to impress patrons, educate students at the Mauseion, or even to add a touch of divine spectacle to temple rituals. Were they the ancient equivalent of high-tech concept cars, or were some actually put into wider use? The surviving texts don't always make the scale of their application clear. So our man Hero, he's thinking. He's mulling over this holy water situation. The manual method is, well, a bit inefficient. It takes up a priest's time. It's prone to human error, or at least human variability. Could a machine do it better? A machine that doesn't get tired, doesn't play favorites, doesn't spill? A machine that dispenses the exact same amount of sanctified liquid every single time, as long as the proper offering, a coin perhaps, is made? The thought is revolutionary for its context. We're so used to machines performing transactions, but in Hero's time, this was cutting edge. It required not just an understanding of mechanics, but a conceptual leap. That a sacred act, or at least a component of it, could be mediated by an inanimate object, a collection of carefully arranged metal and water. You can imagine him sketching on a wax tablet, the stylus clicking softly, a container for the holy water, a slot for a coin, a lever, a valve, a precisely measured weight. The coin, when dropped, would fall onto a small pan attached to one end of a lever. The weight of the coin would tip the lever down. The other end of the lever, inside the machine, would be connected to a plug or a valve that sealed an opening at the bottom of the water container. As the lever tipped, it would momentarily unseat this plug, allowing a set amount of water to flow out. Once the coin slid off the pan, perhaps into a collection box, the lever would return to its original position, and the plug would reseal the opening, ready for the next devout customer, or rather, contributor. It's elegant in its simplicity, really. A perfect little piece of engineering designed to solve a very specific, very Alexandrian problem. There's a certain understated humor in applying such rigorous mechanical logic to something as numinous as holy water. One can almost picture a particularly devout citizen approaching this newfangled device with a mixture of awe and suspicion. You mean, I give my drachma to this bronze box, and the gods will still know I'm pious? It's the ancient world's first foray into unattended sacred retail. The sun is beginning to dip lower now, painting the marble buildings in hues of apricot and rose. The shadows lengthen, and a slightly cooler breeze whispers down the wide avenues. The daytime cacophony of the city is softening into the evening hum. Torches are being lit, casting flickering light onto the intricately carved facades. You continue your slow, drifting walk, your mind replaying the ingenious mechanics of Hero's proposed device. You find yourself drawn by the scent of myrrhs and frankincense, a richer, more potent aroma than the everyday temple incense. It's coming from a particularly grand temple complex, its gates still open as worshippers mill about for evening prayers. There's a low murmur of conversation, a sense of anticipation. Perhaps this is one of the temples that has embraced such innovation, or maybe it's where Hero himself has been seen, discussing his ideas with the more forward-thinking members of the priesthood. You step into a wide courtyard, paved with smooth, dark stones that feel cool underfoot after the sun-baked streets. Fountains gurgle softly in hidden corners, their waters catching the last light of day. The walls are adorned with vibrant frescoes, depicting scenes from the lives of the gods: Zeus, ever majestic; Hera, ever watchful; and perhaps Serapis, a Greco-Egyptian deity particularly popular in Alexandria, with his characteristic modius, a grain measure on his head, symbolizing abundance. There, in a less conspicuous corner, near a basin used for ritual ablutions, you see a small crowd gathered. They're not looking at a priest, but at something else, something metallic, something new. It's not large, perhaps the size of a small amphora, made of bronze that gleams dully in the torchlight. There's a slot near the top, and a small spout near the bottom. A hush falls over the little group as a temple attendant, with an air of slight nervousness mixed with pride, gestures towards it. He holds up a 5 drachma coin, its silver glinting. The air is still, filled only with the distant sounds of the city and the soft splash of the courtyard fountains. You move closer, your curiosity piqued, a silent observer in this ancient scene, watching as history, in its own quiet, unassuming way, prepares to dispense a little bit of ingenuity, one coin, one carefully measured splash at a time. You can almost feel the collective breath held by the onlookers, a mixture of skepticism and wonder. Would this strange contraption truly work? And if it did, what would it mean for the old ways? The quiet anticipation is as thick as the incense smoke. You lean in, trying to get a better view, wondering if this will be a moment of triumph for innovation, or just a curious footnote in the annals of a very inventive mind. The first coin is about to drop, and with it perhaps a tiny shift in the way the sacred and the mundane interact in this magnificent, ever-surprising city of Alexandria. The temple attendant, let's call him Demetrios for the sake of our sleepy narrative, takes a breath that seems to draw in all the ambient sound from the courtyard. His hand, holding the silver 5 drachma coin, hovers over the narrow slot in the bronze device. You can see the faint tremor in his fingers, a tiny betrayal of the pressure he must feel performing this inaugural demonstration. Is he a believer in this newfangled contraption, or just following orders from a particularly enthusiastic and perhaps slightly eccentric high priest who's been cornered by Hero one too many times at the Mouseon's monthly mixer? It's hard to say. His face is a mask of professional calm, but his knuckles are white where he grips the coin. He releases it. For a moment, nothing. Just the soft clink as the coin disappears into the slot. You almost expect a small puff of brimstone or a celestial choir to erupt, but this is engineering, not magic. Or at least, it's marketed as engineering. Then, a subtle sound from within the bronze casing. A delicate thump, almost inaudible, like a tiny gnome gently nudging something inside. This would be the coin landing on its little pan. Then, a faint, whisper-soft squeak, the sound of a well-oiled pivot turning. A sound so minute you have to strain your ears to catch it over the distant city hum and the sigh of the evening breeze. Imagine the precision needed, the careful balancing of weights and levers, all hidden from view. It's like watching a very, very slow magic trick where the magician has published all his methods in a scroll beforehand, but you're still impressed by the execution. And then it happens. A small, perfectly measured stream of water, clear and cool, flows from the spout at the bottom of the device. It's not a gush, not a torrent, just a polite, predetermined quantity, enough to fill cupped hands for a ritual cleansing. It flows for a few seconds and then stops, as cleanly and precisely as it began. Demetrios, looking immensely relieved, catches the water in his hands, performs a quick, symbolic ablution, and then beams at the small crowd, a smile that could power the Pharos lighthouse for a night. A collective sigh, a murmur of appreciation, ripples through the onlookers. An elderly woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles and wisdom, nods slowly, perhaps thinking, well, I'll be. What will they think of next? Self-tying sandals? A younger man, a student type with ink stains on his fingers, leans in closer, trying to peer into the slot, probably already reverse engineering it in his head. You can imagine someone nudging their friend. See? Told you Hero wasn't completely mad, just mostly. It's a quiet triumph, not of gods, but of human ingenuity. Though, of course, the priests would likely frame it as the gods inspiring Hero to create such a marvel for their convenience. It's all about branding, even in antiquity. One portly merchant, reeking slightly of garlic and ambition, steps forward, rummaging in his purse. He produces a coin, but it's a smaller denomination, a tarnished piece of copper. He tries to insert it. Nothing. The slot, you now notice, is precisely shaped. It won't accept just any old offering. Hero thought of that. No free holy water, and no shortchanging the divine, or at least the temple treasury. The merchant grumbles, a bit like a thwarted pigeon, before reluctantly fishing out a proper silver coin. He gets his water, and a slightly smug look from Demetrios. You can almost hear the silent cha-ching in the temple's coffers. Let's allow your consciousness to drift away from this specific temple courtyard, to float on the warm Alexandrian air, carried like a stray papyrus fragment towards the source of such innovations. We're going to Hero's workshop. It's not in the grand public spaces of the Mausion, but likely tucked away in a quieter, more private area, or perhaps even a dedicated space in his own dwelling. The air here smells different. The sweet incense is replaced by the sharper, more metallic tang of heated bronze and iron, the oily scent of lubricants, and the dry, papery aroma of countless scrolls. It's a place of creation, of trial and error. You see benches cluttered with tools that look both familiar and alien. Bronze calipers, primitive hand drills, bow drills that would make your arm ache just looking at them, files, hammers of various sizes, and perhaps a small furnace or crucible for casting metal parts, its bricks blackened with soot. There would be models and prototypes everywhere, gears carved from wood or cast in bronze, strange assemblages of pipes and cylinders, little figures with articulated limbs. Some might be gleaming successes, others discarded failures, a testament to the often frustrating reality of invention. Imagine a half-finished mechanical bird that only hops backwards, or a self-pouring wine jug that has a tendency to aim for the user's lap. Hero's early attempt at an automated cat feeder probably just launched tiny dried fish across the room with alarming velocity. Scrolls are piled high, some containing elegant mathematical proofs, others filled with rough sketches, diagrams with notes scribbled in the margins in Greek. Needs more counterweight, valve leaks, try smaller nozzle. This isn't just a place of thinking, it's a place of doing. Hero isn't merely an ivory tower philosopher, he's a hands-on engineer, someone not afraid to get his robes dirty or his fingers calloused. You can picture him hunched over a complex assembly, his brow furrowed in concentration, muttering to himself as he makes a minute adjustment to a tiny lever. The sheer patience required is astounding. There are no quick software updates here. Every iteration means physically reshaping metal or wood. This coin-operated dispenser, this holy water vending machine, is just one manifestation of his genius. Mainstream historical fact, Hero of Alexandria documented many of his inventions in treatises like Pneumatica, Automata, and Mechanica. These works were incredibly influential, translated into Arabic and later Latin, preserving ancient mechanical knowledge and inspiring Renaissance engineers like Leonardo da Vinci. His mind explored so many avenues. Consider his Ea Olipile, often cited as the first rudimentary steam engine. You can almost see it now in his workshop, a gleaming bronze sphere or cylinder mounted on pivots with two L-shaped nozzles pointing in opposite directions. Below it, a cauldron of water boils over a charcoal brazier. Steam travels up through pipes into the sphere and jets out of the nozzles, causing the sphere to spin faster and faster. It's mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, this little spinning marvel. It didn't do any practical work in Hero's time. It was more of a spectacular curiosity, a demonstration of the power of steam. But imagine the oohs and ahs when he first demonstrated it. Or the first time it spun a little too fast and wobbled off its stand, causing a minor panic. Stand back, everyone. I think I used too much water, or the gods of steam are feeling particularly energetic today. Then there are the automatic temple doors. Picture a grand temple entrance. As the priest lights a fire on a specially designed altar out front, the heat from the fire would warm the air in a hidden chamber beneath. This heated, expanding air would push water from one container into another. This second container, acting as a bucket, would become heavier and descend, pulling on ropes that were cleverly connected to the pivots of the massive temple doors. And so, as if by divine will, the great doors would swing open, revealing the sacred inner sanctum. When the fire died down, the process would reverse, and the doors would slowly, majestically close. It's pure theater, of course, designed to inspire awe and reinforce the mysteries of the temple, but it's also brilliant engineering, hidden in plain sight. Imagine the hushed whispers of the faithful, convinced they'd witnessed a miracle, while Hero, perhaps, allowed himself a small, knowing smile. He even designed a wind-powered organ. Think about that, harnessing the wind, not just for sailing ships, but to create music. A small windmill would drive a piston, which pumped air into the organ's pipes. It's an early, ingenious exploration of wind energy. One wonders if the tunes were always harmonious, or if a particularly gusty Alexandrian day resulted in some rather avant-garde and possibly alarming divine melodies. Is that the hymn to Zeus, or did a flock of seagulls just get sucked into the intake? And on a more practical, less theatrical note, Hero designed a powerful fire engine pump. Given how easily ancient cities, with their closely packed wooden structures, could go up in flames, this was a genuinely life-saving invention. It involved two connected cylinders with pistons, operated by a central lever, capable of directing a strong jet of water onto a blaze. It's a reminder that his work wasn't all just clever toys or temple magic. It also addressed real-world problems. You can picture a frantic scene, flames licking at a merchant's warehouse, and then the arrival of Hero's pump, its operators working the lever with desperate energy, a stream of water arcing through the smoky air. This incredible burst of creativity didn't happen in a vacuum. Alexandria was the place to be. The Ptolemaic rulers, Greek kings who governed Egypt after Alexander's conquest, were keen patrons of the arts and sciences. The Museion and the library were their crown jewels, attracting the best minds. There was a unique fusion here, the rigorous logical traditions of Greek philosophy and mathematics, combined with Egypt's long practical heritage of monumental building, sophisticated irrigation, and exquisite craftsmanship. It was a fertile ground for innovation. Imagine the discussions, the debates, the collaborative spirit, or perhaps the intense rivalries that spurred these developments. You can almost picture philosophers in the Lyceum Gardens arguing over whether Hero's automated flute player, if it could perfectly replicate a human musician, possessed a sliver of the human soul, or if it was just very well-arranged bronze and air. If it plays a sad song, does the machine feel sad, or is it just a particularly clever arrangement of pneumatic despair? But this leads to a question that often puzzles historians. With all this incredible ingenuity, why didn't the ancient world, and particularly Hellenistic Alexandria, experience an industrial revolution? Why didn't these inventions transform society in the way steam power did in the 18th and 19th centuries? There are several overlapping theories, none of them a complete answer on its own. One significant factor was the widespread availability of slave labor. If you can get human beings to do the hard work for very little cost, from the owner's perspective, the economic incentive to develop and implement labor saving machinery is greatly reduced. Why build a complex mechanical grain mill if you have hundreds of slaves to grind it by hand? It's a rather bleak calculation, but one that likely played a role. Hero's devices were marvels, but perhaps they were seen more as luxuries, novelties, or solutions to very specific niche problems, like fair holy water distribution, rather than as tools for mass production or widespread societal change. Then there's the matter of focus. Many of Hero's automata seemed designed to astonish, to entertain, or to enhance religious spectacles. The wow factor might have been prioritized over practical, scalable utility for the common person. Producing these devices also required skilled artisans and relatively expensive materials like bronze. Mass production, as we understand it, wasn't really a concept. Each device would have been a bespoke creation. Weird, tangential detail. While formal patent laws didn't exist, master craftsmen and inventors like Hero guarded their knowledge. Some techniques were kept as guild secrets or within temple workshops. Demonstrating a unique automaton was a way to build immense personal prestige and attract wealthy patrons, which was perhaps more valuable than trying to license a design for mass production in an economy not geared for it. It's like having the only original of a masterpiece painting. Its value is in its uniqueness and the artist's direct association. Furthermore, the scientific understanding, while advanced for its time, still had limitations. Metallurgy, for instance, hadn't reached the point where high-pressure steam engines could be safely and reliably built. The Aeolipile spun impressively, but it couldn't be easily scaled up to power a chariot or a loom without risking an explosion. Hero was a genius, but he was also working within the technological constraints of his era. It's a bit like giving Leonardo da Vinci an iPhone. He'd be fascinated. He might even figure out how it works eventually, but he couldn't build one with 15th century tools and materials. And so, much of this amazing inventiveness remained in the realm of the remarkable, the specialized, the demonstration of principles. Scholarly debate. Historians still debate the true extent of practical application of Hero's automata. Were they primarily theatrical devices for temples and elite entertainment, showcased to a select few, or were simpler, more robust versions of some mechanisms, like perhaps basic pumps or elements of his surveying tools, used more widely in everyday agriculture, construction, or water management than the surviving textual evidence explicitly details? The archaeological record for such delicate mechanisms is sparse, leaving a lot of room for interpretation and discussion about their societal impact beyond the wonder aspect. It's easy to focus on the what-ifs, but let's also appreciate the what was. Hero's work represents a profound understanding of mechanical principles, a testament to the power of human observation and reason. There's a certain boring beauty to it, if you think about it. It's not the clash of swords or the grand pronouncements of emperors that we're contemplating here. It's the quiet, meticulous work of a mind figuring out how to make things move, how to control forces, how to solve problems with gears, levers, and the subtle dance of air and water. The most thrilling part of Hero's day might not have been a public unveiling, but that quiet moment in his workshop when a particularly tricky valve finally seated perfectly, or a complex gear train meshed without a hitch after the 10th attempt. Imagine the tiny internal fist pump of an ancient engineer. Yes, the water flows, and the collection box doesn't jam. I am a god of small, damp transactions. This methodical, often frustrating process of invention, this patient refinement of ideas, this is the often unseen bedrock upon which later, more dramatic technological leaps are built. These aren't just dusty old designs. They are echoes of a way of thinking, a spark of that relentless human desire to understand, to create, and to improve, however modestly. Let's bring our sleepy focus back, just for a moment, to that little bronze holy water dispenser. It stands there, unassuming yet revolutionary. It doesn't have the grandeur of the pharaohs or the intellectual weight of the library's scrolls, but in its own small way, it's a perfect emblem of Alexandrian ingenuity. It's a device born of observation, reason, and a desire for order and fairness, even in the dispensing of something as ephemeral as blessed water. It's a tangible link to a mind that saw the world as a set of fascinating mechanical puzzles waiting to be solved. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of using such a device. You, a citizen of Alexandria, approach. You're not dependent on the mood or generosity of a priest. You make your offering. The mechanism does its work with quiet efficiency, and you receive exactly what you were promised. There's a certain dignity in that simple, reliable transaction. It's a small moment of order in a chaotic world. It's almost soothing. You wouldn't need to haggle with the holy water machine or wonder if it's having a bad day. Excuse me, machine, but I think your benediction felt a little terse today. Are you feeling all right? Perhaps your gears need oiling? The sun has long since set over Alexandria. The city is quieter now, though never truly silent. The taverns are still alive with music and laughter. Watchmen make their rounds, and scholars in the Mosaeon perhaps still burn the midnight oil, debating the nature of the cosmos or the perfect poetic meter. In Hero's workshop, the tools are laid down, the furnace is cooling. His mind, however, is likely still whirring, dreaming up new combinations of levers and siphons, new ways to harness the elements, new solutions to problems both practical and whimsical. The little holy water dispenser in the temple courtyard stands guard in the flickering torchlight, a silent sentinel of innovation. Tomorrow, it will greet new worshippers, accept their coins, and dispense its carefully measured blessings, a small, reliable cog in the vast, intricate machinery of Alexandrian life. It's a reminder that sometimes the most boring inventions, the ones that just quietly do their job, can be the most fascinating, telling us so much about the people who dreamed them up and the world they inhabited. It's the kind of quiet reliability that's actually perfect for drifting off to sleep, just a gentle, predictable flow as the deepest part of the night settles over Alexandria. A profound stillness envelops the city. The moonlight casts long, ethereal shadows from the grand colonnades, and the only sounds are the distant lapping of waves in the harbor and the occasional soft rustle of palm fronds in the nearly motionless air. Your mind, too, feels calm, drifting, contemplating the quiet legacy of Hero's work, especially that unassuming holy water dispenser. It's not just a curio, it's a seed. These boring inventions, the ones that don't involve dramatic battles or passionate speeches, have a way of quietly embedding themselves into the bedrock of human progress. The principles behind Hero's coin-operated device, the lever, the valve, the automated response to a specific input, these are fundamental. While the ancient world didn't experience a full-blown industrial revolution from these sparks, the knowledge wasn't entirely extinguished. It embarked on a long, slow journey, a kind of intellectual Silk Road of its own. Hero's writings, his meticulous diagrams and explanations, were copied by scribes in Alexandria and later in Byzantium. From there, they found their way into the burgeoning intellectual centers of the Arab world during its golden age. Scholars like Al-Jazar, himself a brilliant inventor of automata centuries later, studied and built upon the foundations laid by their Hellenistic predecessors. Then, with the translations of Arabic texts into Latin during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Hero's ideas re-emerged in Europe, inspiring figures like Leonardo da Vinci and other engineers who were rediscovering the lost arts of classical antiquity. It's a fascinating, meandering path for knowledge to take, passed from hand to hand, culture to culture, sometimes with a few amusing mistranslations along the way. You can just imagine some poor Renaissance monk working from a thrice-translated, slightly smudged copy of Hero's Automata, trying to build a mechanical songbird and ending up with something that more closely resembled a self-propelled, aggressively buttering toad due to one misplaced decimal or a misinterpreted gear. But back in ancient Alexandria, consider the human element. Did people miss the interaction with the temple priest when they used the holy water dispenser? There's a certain comfort in human ritual, in looking another person in the eye, even during a brief transaction. Did some of the more traditional temple goers eye the bronze box with suspicion, muttering about how it lacked the proper spiritual gravitas? It just dispenses. One can imagine an old woman complaining to her friend. No kind words, no blessing, just clunk, splash. It's not the same. It's an ancient echo of our modern anxieties about automation. We love the convenience, but sometimes we miss the human touch, even if that touch is just a tired priest on a hot afternoon. Perhaps there were even some priests who felt a twinge of resentment towards their new mechanical colleague. Ever since that bronze box arrived, one might grumble to another over a shared cup of watered-down temple wine. The faithful hardly look me in the eye, and it gets all the good 5 drachma coins, the shiny ones. I'm left with the bent obols and the occasional button. It's a timeless tension, the efficiency of the machine versus the perceived value of human interaction, even in the most sacred of contexts. Of course, the vibrant intellectual ferment of Alexandria, the world that nurtured Hero, couldn't last forever at its peak. Great centers of learning and culture have their seasons. Mainstream historical fact, the Library of Alexandria, that legendary repository of ancient knowledge, suffered several destructive events over many centuries. There wasn't one single cataclysmic fire that destroyed it all at once, as popular myth sometimes suggests, but rather a series of incidents, including fires during Julius Caesar's Alexandrian War, later imperial decrees, and civil strife, combined with neglect, gradually led to its decline and the dispersal or loss of many of its scrolls. However, many important texts were copied and disseminated to other centers of learning before its ultimate fade, ensuring their survival. Imagine the tragedy of that slow decline. Each lost scroll, each faded inscription, a tiny piece of the human story vanishing. How many other ingenious inventions, perhaps even more boring and practical than heroes, were documented on papyri that crumbled to dust or were consumed by flames. We only see fragments of this inventive past, like peering through a keyhole at a vast, bustling workshop. The very fact that Hero's designs for the coin-operated dispenser, the Iolipoli, and the automatic temple doors survived is something of a small miracle, a testament to the perceived value of his work by those who came after him and painstakingly copied his texts. Yet the core idea behind that holy water dispenser, the concept of an automated exchange of value for a service, is remarkably persistent. It's a fundamental human convenience. Once conceived, it tends to reappear. Long after Hero's original device was likely forgotten or had corroded into obscurity, similar concepts emerged independently in different cultures. For instance, in the taverns of 17th century England, you could find rudimentary vending machines that dispensed a measured amount of tobacco when a coin was inserted into a smoker's box. The mechanism was likely different, simpler perhaps, but the principle was the same. A coin in, a product out, no need to bother the busy innkeeper. You can almost picture a grumpy patron in a dimly lit London pub, tapping impatiently on the tobacco box. "Oi, machine, this baccy be a bit damp, and where's the option for shag cut, eh? Call this service." The desire for a quick, impersonal transaction for everyday goods has a long and surprisingly dull history. This makes one wonder about the little details of daily life around such innovations in Alexandria. Weird such tangential detail. While we don't have specific records of complaint slips for Hero's vending machine, ancient societies had various ways of expressing public opinion or grievances. People would sometimes write messages, prayers, or even curses on ostraca, cheap pottery shards, or lead tablets. Graffiti was also common. It's amusing to imagine an ancient Alexandrian, frustrated that the holy water machine was out of stock or jammed, scratching a terse note on a bit of broken pot. Hero, machine number 3, by Serapis Temple, needs lustral water refill, again, and fix the sticky lever, a devoted and thirsty worshiper. It's these tiny, human-scale interactions with technology, even ancient technology, that make history feel so vivid. The true impetus behind Hero's more elaborate automata, especially those designed for temples or public display, continues to be a subject of gentle discussion among scholars. Scholarly debate. Historians still debate the primary motivation behind some of Hero's more whimsical automata. Were they purely for entertainment, designed to delight and amaze the elite at banquets or during festivals? Or were they sophisticated tools of religious theater, subtly demonstrating divine power through hidden mechanics to a largely credulous populace, thus reinforcing the authority of the priesthood? Alternatively, some argue they might have been advanced teaching aids for his students at the Mausion, designed to illustrate complex principles of physics, pneumatics, and engineering in a tangible, memorable way, making abstract concepts concrete. Perhaps it was a blend of all three, a bit of spectacle, a dash of subtle persuasion, and a healthy dose of educational demonstration. The truth is likely a complex tapestry woven from all these threads. Hero was, after all, a multifaceted genius. As the very first hints of pre-dawn light begin to touch the eastern sky, painting it a soft, pearly gray, Your imaginary sojourn in ancient Alexandria is drawing to its natural close. The city is at its quietest now. The great Pharaoh's lighthouse still casts its rhythmic, sweeping beam out over the dark, calm sea, a steadfast beacon in the fading night. The air is cool and still. Even the most dedicated scholars in the Mosaïon have likely succumbed to sleep, their scrolls rolled up, their minds finally at rest. The energy of this incredible city, its vibrant intellectual curiosity, its bustling trade, its complex spiritual life, all seems to coalesce in these final, tranquil moments of darkness. And within that grand tapestry, the memory of Hero's little coin-operated dispenser finds its place, not as a world-changing cataclysm, but as a quiet, persistent spark of human ingenuity. It's a reminder that progress often comes, not in thunderous declarations, but in the methodical, almost boring application of reason to everyday challenges. It's the steady drip, drip, drip of innovation that eventually fills the cistern of human knowledge. One might say, Hero was the patron saint of making things just a little bit more convenient, one drachma at a time. Not the catchiest title, but probably accurate. The mechanics of that ancient vending machine, once so novel, now feel strangely soothing in their predictability. The drop of the coin, the tip of the lever, the release of the water, a simple, reliable sequence. It's the kind of gentle, repetitive process that can easily lull the mind into a state of deep relaxation. No sudden alarms, no complex dramas, just the quiet hum of a well-made device doing its job 2,000 years ago under a sky full of distant, indifferent stars. You probably wouldn't want to be the one responsible for refilling the holy water tank after a particularly busy festival, though. Demetrios, the gods are thirsty again, and someone tried to pay with a seashell. The city of Alexandria, with its marble and its mysteries, its library and its lighthouse, begins to fade from your mind's eye. The sounds of the ancient harbor grow fainter. The scent of exotic spices and sea salt dissolves into the familiar air of your own quiet room. But the gentle rhythm of that ancient machine, the soft click and flow that can stay with you as you drift deeper. And now, as the first true blush of dawn approaches, it's time to let these ancient wonders recede completely, to let the quiet tide of sleep carry you away from the shores of history and into the realm of dreams. The story of the holy water dispenser, a testament to cleverness and the eternal human quest for a slightly easier way to do things, has served its purpose for tonight. It's a reminder that even the smallest, most unassuming mechanisms can tell a fascinating and wonderfully boring story. Let the image of that simple bronze box, standing quietly in the temple courtyard, become a focal point for your relaxation. See the soft gleam of the metal in the torchlight. Hear the faint, almost imperceptible sounds of its inner workings. Each gentle click, each soft sigh of water is a step deeper into tranquility. The story is complete. The journey through time is ending. Now there is only the stillness, the quiet, and the gentle invitation of sleep. Let your thoughts become like water, flowing smoothly, effortlessly, finding their own level, seeking only rest. The day is done, and the night has offered its quiet wisdom, its gentle distractions. There is nothing more to figure out, nothing more to see, only peace. Hey everyone, tonight we're wrapping ourselves in the metaphorical wool habit of a medieval monk to explore a rather curious question. Did these devout individuals really prefer sleeping upright in chilly scriptoriums? Imagine yourself on a long-haul flight, stuck in economy, trying to contort your body into some semblance of a comfortable sleeping position in that rigidly upright seat, the drone of the engines your only lullaby. Not exactly a recipe for restful slumber, is it? Now picture that, but make it 1,000 years ago, in a stone building with no central heating, and your seat is a hard wooden stool, and your only in-flight entertainment is the looming threat of eternal damnation if you oversleep your prayer call. Yeah, you with your memory foam mattress and your ambient sound machine probably wouldn't have lasted a single frostbitten night. The dedication, or perhaps the sheer stoicism, was on another level. So before you get all cozy and start dreaming of well-insulated hermitages, take a quick sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It warms the cockles of my digital heart and helps others find these little sleepy explorations. And, as always, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from, so drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always a quiet thrill to see our global community of historical night owls. Now, hit the lights, get your fan whirring for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The familiar comfort of your room begins to recede, replaced by a sensation of profound, penetrating cold. You find yourself standing before a massive stone structure, its walls thick and unyielding, rising starkly against a sky the color of faded parchment, perhaps tinged with the lavender of a late, cold dusk. This is a medieval monastery. The wind, carrying the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and something anciently stony, whips around the corners of the building, making a low, mournful sound like a distant chant. It's a sound that seeps into your bones almost as much as the chill. There are few windows, and those you see are small, unglazed openings, perhaps covered with wooden shutters or translucent animal horn, offering little barrier to the biting air. The silence here is different from the silence of an empty modern building. It's a weighted silence, punctuated by the occasional tolling of a distant bell, a sound that seems to measure out not just time, but devotion itself. You feel an almost palpable sense of order, of lives lived according to a strict, unwavering rhythm, a world removed from the chaotic tapestry of secular life beyond these walls. The men who inhabit this place, monks, have chosen a life of renunciation, of prayer, and of work, all dedicated to the glory of God and the salvation of souls, their own, and through their unceasing prayers, the souls of all Christendom. Mainstream historical fact. Throughout the Middle Ages, monasteries were vital centers of learning and culture. Monks painstakingly copied ancient texts in their scriptoriums, preserving classical knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. They were also pioneers in agriculture, medicine, and provided charity and hospitality to travelers and the needy. Their world is one of devotion, but also one of considerable physical hardship. Now, about those chilly scriptoriums and the idea of sleeping upright. The scriptorium, if you were to peek inside, is indeed a place of intense, quiet labor. Imagine a long room, often situated to catch whatever natural light was available, though available is a generous term in the oft gloomy climes of northern Europe. You'd see rows of sturdy wooden desks, or carrels, perhaps angled to hold large sheets of parchment. Here, monks would sit for hours, day after day, their breath misting in the cold air, meticulously copying manuscripts. The only sounds would be the scratch, scratch, scratch of quill pens on parchment, the occasional soft rustle of a turning page, or a stifled cough. The air would smell of ink, a mixture of soot or oak galls and gum arabic, and the slightly animalic scent of the parchment itself, made from treated animal skins. It's a place of profound concentration, of painstaking, eye-straining work. But would they sleep here, amongst the inks and the half-finished gospels, perched on their stools? It sounds remarkably uncomfortable, even for men dedicated to a life of asceticism. Perhaps the title of our little journey tonight is a gentle nudge towards exploring the reality of monastic sleep, which was certainly far from luxurious. Life within these stone walls was governed by a set of rules, the most famous and influential in Western monasticism being the rule of Saint Benedict, written in the 6th century. This rule was a marvel of practical wisdom, outlining a balanced life of prayer, ora, and work, labora. It dictated the structure of the day, the duties of the abbot and other officials, the nature of meals, the clothing to be worn, and yes, even how monks were to sleep. Everything was designed to foster humility, obedience, and a communal life focused on God. Weird tangential detail. The rule of Saint Benedict was so detailed that it even specified the tools monks used for their labor should be treated with the same reverence as the sacred vessels of the altar. Imagine a modern office anointing the photocopier with holy oil before a big print job. It brings a certain gravity to the term office supplies. The monastic day was punctuated by the liturgy of the hours, or the divine office, a cycle of 8 prayer services, beginning before dawn and ending after sunset. This relentless schedule was the very heartbeat of the monastery. Matins, also known as vigils, the longest and earliest of these services, often took place in the dead of night, around 2 or 3 a.m. This, as you can imagine, had a significant impact on sleeping's patterns. There was no sleeping in a medieval monastery. The bell would toll, its summons echoing through the cold, dark corridors, and every monk was expected to rise immediately and proceed to the chapel, their minds still half immersed in whatever fleeting dreams the chill allowed. This need for vigilance, for being ever ready to answer the call to prayer, naturally led to a certain attitude towards sleep. Sleep was a necessity, granted by God for the refreshment of the body, so that one could better serve him, but it was not to be an indulgence. The idea of luxuriating in a warm, soft bed for hours on end would have been anathema, a temptation of sloth, one of the 7 deadly sins. So it's not a huge leap to imagine that their sleeping arrangements, even in the designated dormitory, were designed to discourage excessive comfort. Now, about this sleeping upright business. Did monks routinely prop themselves up on stools in the scriptorium or lean against cold stone walls to catch a few winks? While it's an evocative image of extreme asceticism, and certainly some highly devout individuals or those undertaking specific penances might have adopted such practices, it wasn't the prescribed norm for an entire community. The rule of Saint Benedict, for example, actually calls for a communal dormitory, or dortoir, where monks slept in individual beds. However, the nature of that sleep and the posture involved is where things get a little more nuanced. Some historical accounts and interpretations suggest that monks might have slept in a semi-reclining position, or at least in a way that wasn't fully prone and sprawled out. This could have been for several reasons. One was readiness. Being partially clothed in their habit and not deeply ensconced in heavy bedding meant they could rise more quickly for the night offices. Another might have been a form of mortification of the flesh, a way to consciously avoid the creature comfort of deep, luxurious sleep. Think of it as spiritual resistance training against the allure of the snooze button. There were also contemporary beliefs about health and digestion. While we moderns mostly associate lying down with good sleep, there were periods where it was thought that a more upright or semi-upright posture could aid digestion or prevent ill humors from rising to the head. However, for the most part, dedicated ascetic practices were more likely the driver for any significantly upright sleeping. Scholarly debate. Historians still debate the exact nature and prevalence of extreme ascetic sleeping practices within mainstream monastic communities versus the more common arrangements outlined in foundational texts like the Rule of Saint Benedict. It's a complex picture, trying to differentiate between the idealized lives of saints or extreme penitents, individual choices, and the day-to-day reality for the average monk in a typical monastery across several centuries. How much was hyperbole in hagiographies, and how much was common, if uncomfortable, practice? So while the scriptorium itself, with its precious manuscripts and writing implements, was primarily a place of work, not sleep, the spirit behind the idea of uncomfortable, vigilant rest certainly pervaded monastic life. The cold was a constant companion. Monasteries, especially in northern Europe, were notoriously difficult to heat. A single fireplace in the warming room calefactory might be the only source of significant heat in the entire complex, and access to it was often limited. Monks likely slept in their woolen habits, perhaps with an extra cowl or blanket if they were fortunate, but the chill would have been a persistent reality, seeping up from the stone floors and through the thin walls. Let's imagine the evening routine. The bell for Compline, the last office of the day, has sounded its solemn, resonant notes. The monks have gathered in the dimly lit chapel, their voices rising and falling in the ancient Gregorian chants, a river of sound flowing through the darkness. The prayers are for protection through the night, for a peaceful death if God should call, for the peace of the world. There's a profound sense of an ending, of the day's work done, the world outside fading into insignificance. After Compline, the great silence would descend upon the monastery, a period where speaking was generally forbidden until after prime, the first office of the following morning. This silence was not empty, but full of prayerful watchfulness. The monks would file out of the chapel, perhaps their forms casting long, flickering shadows, if a few tallow candles or oil lamps lit their way, their footsteps echoing softly on the cold stone. You follow them, a silent observer in your sleepy imagining, not towards the scriptorium for a night of upright napping on a stool. That would be a very specific and likely very short story of extreme penance, but towards the communal dormitory, the dortoir. This is where the community would take its brief, functional rest. The air grows even colder as you move away from the slightly more trafficked areas of the church or chapter house. The scent of old stone, damp wool, and perhaps the faint, clean smell of straw fills your nostrils. The dormitory awaits, a place not of comfort as we know it, but of necessary repose before the inevitable, chilling call of the night bell summons them back to their primary duty, prayer. The scriptorium, with its patient work, will wait for the meager light of morning. Tonight, the challenge is simply to rest enough to rise again. You find yourself stepping into the long, cavernous space of the monastic dormitory, or dortoir as it was often called. The air in here is heavy with the chill of the night and the faint, collective scent of unwashed wool, old straw, and the close presence of many sleeping, or trying to sleep, human bodies. It's a stark contrast to any modern bedroom you might imagine. Forget plush carpets and soft lighting. This is utilitarianism bordering on the deliberately austere. The dormitory is typically a large, open room, often on an upper floor. Light is minimal, perhaps a single flickering oil lamp at one end, casting deep, dancing shadows, or more likely, just the pale moonlight filtering through the narrow, unglazed window slits, doing little to dispel the gloom. You can hear the soft rustle of straw as monks settle down, the occasional sigh or a muffled cough that echoes slightly in the cold, still air. There's a communal intimacy here, yet also a profound solitude within each monk's personal struggle for rest and spiritual readiness. The beds, if you can call them that, are rudimentary. Don't picture four-posters with feather mattresses. Instead, you see rows of simple pallets, perhaps low wooden frames, or just straw-filled palliasses laid directly on the cold stone or wooden floor. Each monk has his designated spot. Mainstream historical fact. The rule of St. Benedict stipulated that monks should sleep in one common dormitory if possible, and if their numbers were too great, they should be divided by 10s or 20s, with seniors in charge of them. A candle was to be kept burning in the dormitory all night, and they were to sleep clothed and girt, ready to rise without delay for the night office. Sleeping clothed in their habits, their tunic, scapular, and cowl served multiple purposes. It provided some insulation against the pervasive cold. It maintained modesty in a communal setting, and critically, it ensured they were ready to spring, or perhaps, more realistically, creak, to their feet the moment the bell for vigils sounded. There would be no fumbling for clothes in the dark. They were perpetually prepared. The idea of preference for sleeping upright, as our guiding title cheekily suggests, becomes more complex here. It's less about a preference for discomfort and more about an acceptance of conditions that modern sensibilities would find intolerable, all in pursuit of a higher spiritual goal. While deliberately sleeping bolt upright on a stool in a scriptorium would be an extreme and individual act of asceticism, the general sleeping conditions in the dortoir were certainly not conducive to the kind of deep, luxurious, spread-eagled slumber we often crave. Imagine trying to find comfort on a thin layer of straw, the cold seeping up from the floor, you're only covering your woolen habit, which, by the way, wasn't exactly cashmere. Wool can be itchy, and after a long day of manual labor in the fields or hunched over a manuscript in the scriptorium, it probably carried the faint, earthy aroma of honest toil. You might curl up tightly for warmth, perhaps tucking your hands into your sleeves. The very act of trying to get comfortable could be a minor battle against the elements and the austerity of your surroundings. One monk might be a restless sleeper, his rustling straw a source of quiet annoyance to his neighbors. Another might snore, a sound that in the profound silence of the night could probably be heard all the way to the abbot's quarters, possibly earning him some extra penance involving the recitation of psalms. It's the medieval monastic equivalent of having a roommate who insists on listening to death metal at 3 a.m. The chill is a constant, unwelcome bedfellow. You can feel it on your exposed face, your ears, the tips of your fingers if they escape the habit. You might try to pull your cowl further over your head, creating a small, warm pocket of your own breath. But even that offers only temporary respite. This isn't the invigorating chill of a crisp autumn morning. It's a damp, penetrating cold that seems to settle deep in your bones. You'd think they'd all be riddled with arthritis, and perhaps they were, but their focus was elsewhere. Why endure such conditions? Part of it was undoubtedly practical. Monasteries, especially in their earlier, poorer days, simply lacked the resources for more comfortable amenities. But a significant part was philosophical, theological. The body was seen as something to be disciplined, not indulged. Comfort could lead to laxity, to a weakening of spiritual resolve. The discomfort of the cold, the hardness of the bed, these were small, constant reminders of the suffering of Christ, of the fleeting nature of earthly existence, and of the need for constant vigilance against the temptations of the flesh. It was a form of passive martyrdom, a daily offering of discomfort. You wouldn't complain to the abbot that your straw was a bit lumpy. You'd offer up the lumpiness for the good of your soul, or perhaps for the soul of a particularly sinful benefactor who donated land to the monastery. Consider the psychological aspect, lying in the dark, in the cold, waiting for the bell that will summon you to prayer in the middle of the night. It's not an environment that encourages deep, carefree sleep. Instead, it fosters a state of semi-alertness, a kind of liminal consciousness where one is neither fully awake nor fully asleep. This state might even have been conducive to certain mystical experiences or a heightened sense of spiritual awareness, or it might have just made them very, very tired and prone to seeing visions of angels in their soup the next day. The rule of Saint Benedict, while advocating for a common dormitory, also implicitly understood the need for order and minimal disturbance. Monks were to rise quietly without waking their brethren unnecessarily. This itself suggests that sleep was valued, even if it wasn't luxurious. It was a necessary component of the rigorous monastic machine. Weird tangential detail, some monastic orders developed intricate systems of sign language to communicate during periods of prescribed silence, which often included the dormitory after compline. Imagine trying to signal to your neighbor that his snoring is shaking the very foundations of the building, and could he please roll over, all without uttering a single syllable. It probably involved a lot of dramatic pointing and mimed suffocation. So if not fully upright like a sentry in the scriptorium, how did they manage? It's plausible that some monks, either due to personal piety, a desire for extreme mortification, or even just chronic back pain from hours of copying manuscripts on ill-fitting stools, might have found ways to rest in a more supported, semi-reclining position if their bed setup allowed. Perhaps they propped themselves against the cold stone wall if their pallet was near one, or used a small bundle of their meager possessions as a sort of bolster. It wouldn't be sleeping upright in the starkest sense, but rather finding the least comfortable way to be slightly less uncomfortable while still maintaining an air of ascetic rigor. Or more simply, they just endured. Humans are remarkably adaptable, especially when motivated by profound belief. They might have simply learned to sleep in short bursts, to wake, pray, and return to their chilly beds without ever fully succumbing to deep, oblivion-inducing slumber. One can imagine a young novice, new to the monastery, struggling nightly with the cold and the hard bed. He sees the older monks, seemingly serene, or at least resigned in their nightly repose. He wonders if he'll ever get used to it, if his desire for a warm bed is a sign of spiritual weakness. He shivers, pulls his rough habit tighter, and prays for the strength to endure, and perhaps for the bell for vigils to come quickly, just so he can get up and move around. The scriptorium, by comparison, even with its own bone-chilling drafts during the day, might seem almost welcoming after a night in the dortoir, because at least there you are doing something, your mind engaged, your hands moving. The very idea of preference in such a context is almost a modern luxury. For a medieval monk, it wasn't about what you preferred, it was about what was prescribed, what was edifying, what led you closer to God. If that meant enduring a perpetually cold bed and fragmented sleep, then that was the path. There was no Yelp review for monastic dormitories. 1 star, drafty, straw lumpy. Bell rings at ungodly hours. Would not recommend for a relaxing getaway. The purpose was entirely different. Scholarly debate. There's ongoing discussion among historians about the material culture of monastic sleep. While texts like the Rule of St. Benedict provide guidelines, archaeological evidence for bedding is often scant and open to interpretation. How much straw was typically used? Were there variations in bedding based on the monk's status, age, or health? Did practices change significantly over the centuries, or vary widely between different monastic orders or geographical locations? Some argue for a generally uniform, harsh standard, while others suggest there might have been more subtle gradations and adaptations than the strict rules imply, perhaps unwritten customs that allowed for minor alleviations, especially for the sick or elderly. The darkness in the dormitory is thick, almost tangible. Occasionally, a shaft of moonlight will illuminate a row of still forms, each wrapped in their habit, looking like shrouded figures awaiting some silent call. The collective breathing of dozens of men creates a soft, rhythmic undercurrent to the silence. You might hear the distant hoot of an owl, a reminder of the wild, untamed world that lies just beyond the monastery's protective walls, a world these men have renounced, yet for which they continuously pray. The scriptorium, with its daytime focus and intellectual bustle, however subdued, feels a world away from this nocturnal realm of enforced stillness and chilly endurance. While a monk might occasionally nod off at his desk during a long day of copying, an image that is certainly relatable to anyone who has pulled an all-nighter studying, the dormitory was the designated space for this communal, disciplined rest. The cold, the hardness, the readiness for prayer, these were the defining characteristics, not a preference for any particular posture, but an acceptance of a life where physical comfort was a very distant, almost irrelevant concern. The only warmth to be found was the spiritual fire of their devotion, a flame they tended diligently through the long, cold nights. and perhaps the collective body heat of several dozen men in a large stone room, however minimal, offered some small, shared defense against the encroaching frost. It's a somber thought, but one that speaks volumes about their commitment. The scriptorium was for the work of the mind and hand. The dormitory was for the work of the soul, wrestling with the body's need for rest in an environment designed to remind it of its impermanence. As the night wears on, the deep chill in the dormitory seems to intensify. The stone walls radiate cold, and the straw beneath you offers little insulation against the damp that creeps up from the earth. Each breath you take is a small, visible cloud in the darkness. You can almost feel the longing for dawn, not just for its light, but for the meager warmth and the activity that will allow your limbs to unstiffen. The idea of a scriptorium, even a chilly one, starts to sound appealing, if only because it means movement and focus, a distraction from the persistent, gnawing cold of the night. This nightly endurance, this collective experience of disciplined discomfort, undoubtedly shaped the medieval monk's worldview. It wasn't just about physical toughness, it was about spiritual fortification. The constant low-level suffering was a way to tame the body's demands, to subordinate physical desires to spiritual aspirations. When your primary mode of existence is one of austerity, small comforts, a rare sunny day, an extra ladle of thin soup, a brief moment by the warming room fire becomes sources of profound gratitude, not taken for granted luxuries. It's a perspective so alien to our modern obsession with comfort and convenience. Imagine the mental discipline required not just to endure, but to find spiritual meaning in such prolonged discomfort. No wonder they wrote such incredibly detailed theological treatises. They had a lot of quiet, cold time to think. But what about the actual health implications? We, with our modern understanding of sleep hygiene, might look at these practices with alarm. Chronic sleep deprivation, sleeping in cold, damp conditions. It sounds like a recipe for illness. And indeed, medieval populations, including monks, were susceptible to a host of ailments. Mainstream historical fact. Despite the perception of monasteries as havens, monks were not immune to the diseases of the time. Respiratory illnesses, rheumatism, and ailments related to malnutrition or unvaried diets were common. However, many monasteries also had infirmaries and herb gardens, and monks were often among the most literate people with access to medical texts, making them some of the primary caregivers and medical practitioners of the era, for better or worse given the state of medieval medicine. The life was harsh, but it was also, in its own way, ordered and predictable. The rhythm of prayer and work provided a structure that could be, in itself, a source of stability, and perhaps the sheer intensity of their spiritual focus provided a psychological buffer against some of the physical hardships. Or maybe they were just used to it, their bodies and minds acclimated from a young age. If they entered the monastery as oblates, child recruits, you wouldn't find them idly scrolling through social media on their illuminated manuscripts to pass the time. Every moment was, in theory, directed. Let's revisit the scriptorium for a moment, not as a primary sleeping place, but in the context of this overall culture of endurance. If a monk was tasked with finishing a particularly important manuscript, a text needed by the abbot or requested by a patron, and the dim daylight hours were insufficient, He might indeed spend extra hours there, working by the flickering light of a candle or a small oil lamp, a practice often discouraged due to the risk of fire to the precious books. In such a scenario, exhausted, cold, and with the ever-present call to night prayers looming, it's easy to imagine him nodding off at his desk, his head resting for a moment on his arm, his chilled fingers still curled around his quill. This wouldn't be sleeping upright as a preferred method, but as an accidental consequence of dedication and exhaustion in an already uncomfortable environment. He might even try to prop himself up to avoid falling fully asleep and missing the bell for vigils, or to avoid the sin of idleness that deep sleep during working hours might represent. The scriptorium stool, hard and unforgiving, would certainly do its part to prevent any prolonged, comfortable dozing. It's the medieval equivalent of trying to power nap in a library carrel during finals week, only much, much colder and with more Gregorian chanting. Weird, sartangential detail. Some monks, particularly those known for their extreme piety or those engaged in deep contemplative prayer, might have used prayer stools or even specially designed uncomfortable chairs that discouraged slouching and promoted alertness during long vigils or private prayer, sometimes even in their own cells, if they were senior enough to have one. These weren't strictly for sleeping, but for maintaining a state of prayerful wakefulness. And it's possible the lines blurred between a very deep, prayerful trance and a light, upright doze, especially in the dead of night. The idea of preference for such discomfort, as highlighted in our sleepy title, really boils down to a redefinition of priorities. It wasn't that they liked being cold or sleeping on hard surfaces. It's that they valued other things more: their spiritual salvation, their obedience to the rule, the communal life of prayer, and the sense that their hardships were an offering to God. Seen through that lens, the discomforts became meaningful, even desirable, not for their own sake, but for what they represented. This is a profound psychological shift from our modern pursuit of happiness through comfort. They were pursuing holiness through hardship. One wonders if a medieval monk, transported to a modern bedroom with its soft mattress, climate control, and blackout curtains, would be able to sleep at all, or if he'd find it distractingly, sinfully comfortable. He might end up on the floor, just out of habit. Scholarly debate. Historians and theologians continue to discuss the psychological and spiritual impact of such sustained ascetic practices. Did these extreme disciplines genuinely lead to heightened spiritual insight and a closer relationship with the divine, as proponents believed? Or did they, in some cases, lead to physical and mental health issues, spiritual pride, or an unhealthy obsession with bodily mortification? The surviving texts often present an idealized view, particularly in the biographies of saints, making it challenging to assess the average monk's daily experience and the full spectrum of outcomes. It's the difference between reading the highlight reel of an Olympic athlete versus understanding the daily grind and potential for injury. As the long night finally begins to yield and the first, almost imperceptible, lightening of the eastern sky signals the approaching dawn, a new energy starts to stir in the monastery. The bell for lauds will soon ring, another call to prayer, this time to greet the new day. The monks will rise from their chilly pallets in the dormitory, their bodies stiff, their minds perhaps still clinging to the tendrils of fleeting dreams, but their spirits ready, or at least willing, to resume the ceaseless round of devotion. The scriptorium, too, will soon come to life. Monks will return to their desks, their fingers perhaps numb with cold, as they first take up their quills. The ink might be thick from the overnight chill, but the work will continue, the quiet scratching will resume, and the knowledge, the stories, the prayers will continue to be painstakingly copied, preserved against the ravages of time in these cold, dedicated spaces. So did medieval monks prefer sleeping upright in chilly scriptoriums? Probably not as a general rule or a matter of preference in the way we understand it. The scriptorium was for work. The dormitory, however austere, was for their communal, disciplined rest. But the spirit of that question, the endurance of cold, the acceptance of discomfort, the readiness for prayer, the subordination of bodily needs to spiritual goals, that was woven into the very fabric of their existence. They lived a life where comfort was an afterthought, and vigilance, both physical and spiritual, was paramount. Their sleep, like every other aspect of their lives, was an offering. The chill you've felt, the hard bed you've imagined, the relentless call of the prayer bell, these were their daily realities. And in understanding this, we understand a little more about the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the profound ways in, which faith can shape every waking and indeed every sleeping moment. Let the image of that cold, stone dormitory, filled with the quiet, disciplined presence of the sleeping monks, now begin to fade. Let the distant sound of the pre-dawn bell dissolve into the gentle sounds of your own space. The journey into their chilly, austere world is complete. They met the dawn with prayer. You can meet it when it comes, with the refreshment of a peaceful sleep. Their beds were hard, their nights were cold, their sleep was often short. But in that disciplined world, they found a rhythm, a purpose that transcended earthly comfort. As you settle into your own comfortable bed, appreciate the warmth, the softness, the quiet. Let the story of their austere lives be a gentle reminder of the peace that can be found in simplicity and the deep rest that comes after a long journey into the past. The night is drawing to a close, and the need for vigilance can be laid aside. Allow the cold of the monastery to be replaced by the warmth of your covers, the hard stone floor by the softness of your mattress. Let the gentle, regular rhythm of your own breathing be your only guide now, leading you into a deep and restorative peace. There are no bells to answer, no duties to perform, only the sweet embrace of sleep. Good night.